Okay, so my name's Veronica Wynne Hughes. Is the distance okay from the microphone? All right. So if you read the introduction, basically I'm going to be talking about the sailing trip, which I did for 2.5 years, halfway around the world. So I started out at this part of the planet, and then I ended up directly the other half. So if we were to drill a hole through the planet, then that's where I would have ended up. It was in the Cook Islands, Rarotonga, that I flew back from. Coming up to a year ago was when I returned to Hungary. And since then, I've kind of changed, I guess, career paths again, because I've gone into expeditions and cold places. One of which I did was the Northwest Passage this May. It was a 400-kilometer trek, maybe, or a skiing expedition from a place called Cambridge Bay to a place called Joe Haven in the north of Canada, so over sea ice that's frozen in during those months of the year. And now I'm planning and training to be the first ever Hungarian to reach the South Pole from the edge of the continent during a 2-month expedition and getting to the South Pole and then being flown out of there, so not there and return. So I would like to talk to you about psychology because my profession is a psychologist, the sailing trip, the Northwest Passage, and Antarctica. That's all I have, and I'm going to try and fit it into half an hour. All right, so psychology. I've actually spent the last weekend in Liverpool, which is where I went to university, and it turns out at the airport, I saw these banners out saying my old university is the #1 university in the UK this year, which is amazing. And I keep referring to their slogan, which was dream, plan, achieve. And it sounds really, really simple. It doesn't sound like there's much to it, but I see many people as a psychologist who get stuck in different phases. So they either get stuck in the dreaming phase, and many people often tend to want to live through other people's experiences, or you can also get stuck in the planning phase, where you plan a trip to the Canary Islands for 6 months, which is a bit maybe much. And then there's the achievement phase, which is ideally where you want to get to. So I was thinking about the one duty that I have in my life towards myself before I went on this sailing trip, and it was to find happiness. I know that sounds cheesy, very, very cheesy. It's to find happiness, because I just thought there's the one life I have on this planet, that's all I know for sure. I can spend it by experiencing the world through a television screen, or I can just go and check it out myself. So that was the kind of incentive that got me going. And I've always said, strive for happiness and also personal self-development, to keep bettering yourself, to keep improving yourself. And I certainly was striving for both of those. And sometimes it becomes difficult because there are social norms. There's pressure, societal pressure, telling you you have to pursue a career, you have to have children, you have to have a big house, have a nice car, start paying your mortgage and everything. And I think, and I find in my work as well, that trying to escape from those things is not necessarily a solution, because if you have difficulty accepting social norms, then wherever you go in the world, there are always going to be social norms, and in fact, they're quite similar to our norms here in Europe. But if you can get into the rhythm, and you can understand the point of why these norms are in place, then you learn, you get the ability to tweak the game and travel, but also be a part of society. It's just a matter of which social norms you decide to allow yourself to be pressured by. So that's JMU, that's the Liverpool John Moores University. And here are the questions that I've also already been referring to. Why am I on the planet? Why do I work? What's work? What's the point of working? Is it to fund a life? Or am I living to work. It's just a very tricky balance to keep in mind. So the money I make while I work, is that then to be spent by having an investment in a bank, and then I spend my hours after work at home watching Game of Thrones, or just distracting myself and not really having much of a life besides work? Or do I work to support a life where I have hobbies, I have passions, I go ahead and I pursue them? So again, it's a balance thing. It's interesting to look into what's holding people back, what kind of fears there are, and how realistic those fears are. Are they founded? Are they maybe passed on to us through parents? Okay, I'm going to try and keep all of this into 30 minutes, but I just thought it's such an amazing planet. We're so lucky to be here, and to give it a miss would be a huge shame. Now I have some melted ice from the Northwest Passage, and whoever gives me the smartest, the funniest, or even the savviest question at the end will win this melted ice. All right? I'll put that there to remind you. All right, great. Game of Thrones. We do need entertainment in our lives, for sure, and that doesn't need to be taken away. But the number of series that exist, the number of movies, the number of hours we spend watching these movies end up being hours spent in distraction. And then there's the question of entertainment versus real-life experiences. Entertainment's necessary for sure. I don't wish to question that at all. But when you look at the number of things coming out, the number of series, episodes, I think it gets a little scary. In the UK, I was told by one of my old skipper's wives that if someone wants to commit suicide and the police gets called out and they don't commit suicide but they try, and if this happens a number of times, 3 or 4 times, then the police fine the person for time wasting. Can you imagine that? And that's an interesting analogy, because in my imagination, life fines, and it fines very high. So if you, for time wasting, you're going to look back and you're going to think, all right, so all the number of hours I spent watching TV rather than getting real experiences or being with my friends, and be that whatever. It doesn't have to be travel. It can be becoming an astronaut. It can be breeding your own special type of donkey. Anything at all, as long as it's something that you get into and that you feel that you are living for. So that was something that very much drove me. And then we also have the owning of objects, the owning of gadgets in our houses. So I have a question for you about the number of objects that you have in your house that you feel might be unnecessary, or that you feel you don't use any more often than once a year. What percentage of your things do you think is unnecessary? 90? All right. 90 is a pretty high number. 40, there we go. There we go. There's some more. 70, okay. All right. 40%'s good. 40%'s good. I used to have a lot, I'll admit, because my favorite color used to be purple. So anything I saw that was purple and I liked, I would get for my flat to make it all purple. And it was just embarrassing and ridiculous. And now that I've come home and I see all these unnecessary items, I've given them away. I've tried not to throw them away. I've given them away. But it's just interesting how you can get sucked into this reality of the owning of objects and how you think those make you happy, but then you think about whether they actually do or not. But moving on to more interesting topics, sailing. Okay, so that's where I set out, where the red line starts in the middle of the Mediterranean on Malta. And then I headed west, non-stop, all the time west, to Sardinia, Ibiza, Malaga, Gibraltar, Canary Islands, did an Atlantic crossing, Caribbean, Panama, Belize, Galapagos, and then a Pacific crossing down to French Polynesia, Cook Islands, and Samoa. So that's the halfway around the planet bit. I didn't have the money to go and travel in a way that would have been able to fund 3 years or 2.5 years of doing hotels and paying for planes. So I was thinking about what the cheapest way would be to be able to still travel the world and be able to fund it, which was basically hitchhiking on sailboats, meaning working for skippers around about 2 to 3 hours every day in exchange for just food and a bed. So basically, they had a personal servant on their boat, and I got to travel for free, so it was a win-win situation for both of us. So that's where I got, and after my Antarctic expedition, I planned to do the rest or complete the circumnavigation, if you like, and carry on. So no money. I did do risk assessment, though. I was, as Albert said, does it get dangerous when you're living in an enclosed small space with another human being, usually a man, ideally a couple? Can it get dangerous? There's no CCTV cameras out in the middle of the Pacific. He can literally just push you overboard and get away with it, come back and claim, I fell overboard. It's very easy to do. Did it happen? No. Did it ever come near to happening? No. But I didn't set out without doing the risk assessment. So I did a 1.5 years of Krav Maga, just to make sure. And that wasn't necessarily against the skippers. It was more the boat could be anchored anywhere at all. I'm not familiar with the country. I might walk into a neighborhood without knowing whether it's dodgy or not. And I might want to get out very quickly. But ideally, obviously, if anything happened, I'd still try and run away rather than try my special art. But it was definitely something to think about. And I also got medical insurance. So those were the only two things. And I always made sure that I had enough money in my bank account that I could fly home from anywhere at any time. And it's just very interesting to think that we've got this huge planet that seems very huge, and yet there's internet everywhere, there are airports everywhere, and literally you can be back home from anywhere within 24 hours. It's not that big, and it's not that inaccessible. So moving over to polar bear stories. Many people, I got discouragements and encouragements equally, I'd say. I've been planning this expedition for over 4 years now to Antarctica, and the Northwest Passage was part of the preparation. And so people often don't realize the amount of work that's been put into researching it. It's not just me thinking about, oh, can I find a boat that's going towards Antarctica, and then I'll just jump off and try and walk to the South Pole and try and walk back out and hitch another boat. It's not like that at all. So there's an organization that has managed every single expedition so far to the South Pole. The logistics are down to the very fine details. It's really nothing's up to me. I'm told what to take, when to go, how to go, how often to check in with them, everything really. But still, to this very day, I get people who are even family friends come around to me and say, but you know it's cold there, right? And I just love playing on this. I go, oh, you know what? I never thought about that. Maybe I'll just cancel. So it's just amazing how people's reactions can seem very discouraging, because they kind of assume there are know-it-alls that I've called know-it-alls that have, say, been to Norway or even been to Svalbard, and they contact me and they say, oh, so take this stove or take that thing, and you know the wind's going to be very strong down in Antarctica. So it's very hard to to find the right answer for these people, because they assume you're stupid. They assume you haven't done your research, where in fact you have. And then there's the people that say, yeah, take dried nuts, dried fruit and nuts. And then more who will say, until you've been to some yoga retreat in the middle of nowhere for 6 months or a month, there's no way you'll be able to do Antarctica. So they put their experience ahead of yours, and they'll find ways. And I can assure you, Shackleton, Scott, or Nor Amundsen had been to any yoga retreat before they did their trip. But rather than talking about myself and the kind of feedback I've been given, that's been very mixed, and there's obviously encouragement as well. But I think raising children, a lot of it boils down to the way your parents relate to you when you grow up. So parents who are encouraging and talk about the how and the why that you can do stuff, rather than the discouragements of, oh no, don't even try, you'll fall off, don't climb up that tree, it'll never work, you haven't done it again. Focusing on the stuff you haven't done creates the self-efficacy of the child, which is the belief in themselves and the belief that they can do stuff. And certainly that is hugely influenced. For example, if there's time, I'll just quickly go into it. I was about 5 when I arrived to a new country, and my father gave me some money from another country, the previous country, because we grew up sailing. So we arrived to Italy, and my father gave me 5 liras or francs from France. So we arrived to Italy. I had to change the francs into liras, and I had to go and find bread and take it back. So I didn't know that he was following me, but he followed me for this whole trip, and they weren't too far away at the time. It seemed like it was very far. So I had to go into the bank, have my money changed, and then go and find a bakery, and then take bread back to the boat. So it's all these kind of little things that parents do, where they put they communicate to their kids that they are capable, and they have faith and trust in their kids, that I think very much builds that self-efficacy that's required to then go ahead and do big things. All right, Northwest Passage. How realistic are fears? So polar bears. It's very interesting because they're a predator, right? They are very fast. They're not particularly cuddly in real life, in fact, not cuddly at all. And yet, it's important to assess how dangerous a situation you're going into and how prepared you are. So we had satellite phones, we had flare guns, we had proper guns, the tent. We had everything we needed that would deter a polar bear. The only risk there was, and as well a dog, the only risk there was if the polar bear would sneak up on us without the dog noticing. However, a very interesting comment from two people I know, Christine and Lottie. Christine was one of the girls I went on this expedition with, and before starting the expedition, I just spoke to them or asked them what they thought about what to do, what the kind of drill would be if we encountered a polar bear. And Christine, who's Norwegian, said, "Oh, I didn't even think about that." So that's one kind of perspective. And the other one is Lotzi, who did an expedition across Svalbard, and he was telling me about their gun, and that they stored their gun in the bottom of their sleds, because his argument was, well, if you see a polar bear, you're dead anyway, so it doesn't matter if you have a gun or not. So I'm very much trying to find this middle ground between these two people, and have spoken to many people who've done proper expeditions across Greenland, across the Northwest Passage, encountered polar bears, and they're very, very intelligent animals, so there has never been a record of a polar bear attacking a moving expedition. Research expeditions, yes, but a polar bear needs time to look at your behavior, to find to find when you're at your weakest. It's not just going to see you from the horizon, start charging towards you, and tear you apart. In fact, no animal does that. It'll attack you for a reason. So similarly to sharks as well, in the Pacific Ocean, there's the great white shark, and then there's all the other sharks that aren't anywhere near as dangerous as the great white. So you need to pick and choose. You need to look at locals, speak to them, find out about their experiences, and kind of educate yourself before you allow your fears to govern you. Okay, lack of environmental exposure. How comfortable have we got? When it's too hot in the summer, we just switch on air conditioning. If it's too cold in the winter, we've got these amazing clothes we can put on. If we have a cough, we go and get medicine or antibiotics. And we hardly ever expose ourselves to the environment. And yet, when you're out there on the ice or crossing an ocean in a boat, you realize how you too, or I too, am just an animal, just another animal. We crossed the Atlantic Ocean. We had an electric failure 3-4 days in. We had no fridge, no lights, no hardly anything. Basically, all we had was the boat, somewhere to sleep, something to eat. We all survived. We were eating meat and food that was gone off, by far. No one even got ill, no one at all. So, comfort is a big enemy because we like to travel around taking our comfort zones with us. And so it's the second, I know again very cheesy, that you step out of that comfort zone that you start really experiencing adventures and interesting encounters. And so that's how I became the first Hungarian to ever cross the Northwest Passage, was kind of dealing with these day-to-day or on the ice day-to-day struggles of keeping an eye out, skiing and constantly doing 180s with your head to look around and see whether anything's following you. And we were in fact stalked by a polar bear for about 5 hours and had to do the drill of trying to scare it away with everything we could. We were given permission to shoot it, but we didn't want to, so we decided to just ski on and keep an eye on it. So yes, we were granted the permission to shoot it from 25 meters as opposed to the 5, because you're only allowed to shoot it if it comes within 5 meters, which is very, very, very close for a polar bear. You don't want a polar bear being 5 meters from you. But when we rang the authority and described what the situation was and that we were 3 different polar bears about 50 or 40 meters from us, they gave us permission to shoot it from 20 meters. So the polar bear started coming closer and closer, and it stopped at 25. So we were staring it in the eye and thinking, okay, we could just walk forward 5 meters and shoot you, but we don't want to. So why don't we just carry on and see if we can do this together? So Antarctica, 3 records, it seems. No Hungarians ever been to the South Pole from the edge of the continent. Always a South Pole expedition is defined by getting to the South Pole from the edge of the continent by yourself. So no kites, no tractors, no last degree expeditions, no airplanes. There's been plenty of Hungarians at the South Pole who've been flown in, but no one that's actually got there on their own skis. And I'll be within the first 15 women worldwide to do it solo as well. But what are the risks? No one's actually died since Scott, Shackleton, and Anderson. That's a bit of a tricky one to say quickly after each. So Scott, Shackleton, and Anderson were the first ones there, or the big pioneers of Antarctica. And since then, there's been Henry Worsley a couple of years ago who died, who was the first one ever to die in an expedition there. He died of an infection, peritonitis, that he had before he did the expedition, and he went on a route that was twice as long as the one I want to go on, a very difficult one, and he had no resupplies, and it just got very bad. His infection just grew and grew and grew. So risk-wise, I'll have maps with me, NASA maps, that are renewed every single year, so up-to-date ones. And the biggest danger is going to be crevasses. So, but because I'll have the maps, I'll also be given waypoints that if I navigate by, then I'll avoid these crevasses. But no one has ever died falling into a crevasse during an expedition in Antarctica. Plastic planet, though. So these pictures are, the one on the beach is Panama, the one with next to the boat is Samoa, and the one with the goggles, this big white thing you'll see, is a huge big plastic sack that got caught round our propeller that I had to go down and cut off. There's plastic everywhere. There's many boats that have these huge big nets, very, very fine mesh nets that they trawl after themselves, measuring the amount of microplastic or just regular plastic in the ocean. It's unbelievably huge. However, my intention is not to get people to not use plastic. It's more to get people to recognize the plastic that they use. For example, yesterday I was just buying a yogurt in a shop, and there was the option of the plastic container yogurt versus the glass container yogurt, or when you drink a soft drink, there's the option of having the half-liter plastic container one versus the aluminium one. So it's all about just raising awareness about plastic, and because Antarctica's the most vulnerable continent on the planet to human behavior, I believe it's the best place to do it. I'll be carrying my rubbish in my sled, so there's nothing you can leave behind on Antarctica. There's unlike here in these parts of the world, if you leave anything behind, it decomposes gradually. Even if you just leave a sandwich in a forest, there's going to be slugs, bugs, rain that washes it away, and it's just going to seep into the earth. On Antarctica, there's nothing. It'll just stay there for millions and millions of years. In fact, they've only just found a piece of cake that I think Shackleton left behind, and apparently it's edible. So this is what Antarctica is going to be about. And reading these buttons, I guess, I wonder which one of you would feel they're able to do it, or would feel like they have these necessary traits. Because looking at them, I think most people do. Definitely as a psychologist, looking at some people's struggles, many people's struggles, having the energy to deal with it, extreme problems, endurance, having small achievements, challenging themselves, they're all very much, I think, there in every single person. But again, it's just the decision of what to do with these qualities that we have. So an eventful lead up to Antarctica. Can anyone guess what that is? What that's the outline of? Yep, exactly, Greenland. So unfortunately, another polar bear territory, but it's the only place you can really train for Antarctica. And so that's going to happen in April. And then I'll be off to Norway for about 3 weeks on my own, fully on my own, having to be self-sufficient in the winter and survive, basically. But the Greenland bit's going to be as part of a team. Will I do it? I don't know. It's still down to funding, but I've got my qualifications. I'm going to do Greenland. So it's just now up to the rest of it. And summary-wise, okay, so if you think about what I've just talked about, then can you do this tick list for yourself and look into deeply within you to think about these questions? What makes you happy? What's holding you back? Do you really know what you want? Do you really want it? Have you told your friends? Have you done your risk assessment? Do you have the information that you need? Do you have the resources that you need? Have you been maybe overthinking it or underthinking it? And I think once I've ticked all those off, that was when I knew that I was ready to do the stuff I've done. There we go.